I'm Suhail Ali, and I'm the Vice President and Head of Clinical Delivery for the Icon Biotech. And I've been in the industry for 20 plus years now. Currently, I lead the team of clinical research associates and clinical trial managers across the Asia Pacific. And they run the clinical trial portfolio what we have. First of all, clinical trials is a very dynamic landscape. So I have seen it evolve from, say, when we used to have a lot of new chemical entities to biologicals and to nowadays the cell therapies. So there has been a major shift or major change across in the APAC, and so has been the change in the regulatory authorities across the APAC region. APAC is a very diverse region. So some of the regulatory authorities, they're quite evolved, they're quite developed, while some of the regulatory are still in the process of evolution. Also in the clinical trials, a lot of times because the drug is in a very early stage, so there is a finite or very limited amount of the drug available. What the companies usually try to do is that they'll try to have maybe just-in-time delivery of the drug when the patient is about to come and be randomized into the clinical trial. So for that, you need really very, say, error-proof planning. So your planning need to be really strong in there. Also, when I say the clinical trial logistics, I'm not only talking about the investigational product. There are various other, which we call the clinical trial supplies, which may include lab kits, which may include devices and instruments. And over a period of time, we have seen more and more involvement of the devices as well. So not only for the investigational or the drug product, you also need to know very well, or you also need to plan very well around the devices and the instruments, which also need to be distributed across the research sites. So that's another thing we need to consider. And last but not the least, because we are in a global business, so there are always chances of a country level or a regional level or a global level disruptive event happening. And COVID was one example of that. So you need to have done enough planning, and you need to have very good risk management strategy in place for the trial logistics also, because these kind of events may actually disrupt the entire the logistic plan itself. We should plan upfront. So the upfront planning is the first, and it may go at like as early as when you are kind of producing the investigational product, and then you are setting up your systems like IVRS system or IWRS system. So when you are doing that planning, you need to really involve multiple stakeholders, because the logistics or the clinical trial logistics, they not only involve regulatory, they involve the logistic group, they involve the clinical operations. So there has to be involvement from multiple stakeholders so that you do a pretty solid upfront planning. Then you need to also pressure test your plans, as well as you also need to kind of do some dry runs, because sometimes the dry runs may actually highlight some unknown risks in there. So it's really important to do a dry run and also pressure test your assumptions, because all of your plans are based on certain assumptions. Always you should have the mitigation plans and the backup plans in place. So what if things really go wrong? What is a plan B in that case, which we can activate? So these three things are really the core part of our risk management strategy, I would say, to kind of tackle those known and unknown challenges. First of all, most of the global organizations, they have strong regulatory affairs department internally. So what really helps is because these departments, they really keep a tab on the evolving regulatory landscape. So in case there are any updates, so they maintain the database of those updates, and they also inform the relevant stakeholders so that the plans are accordingly fine-tuned. But still, as I said, there are some regulatory authorities which are still in the evolution stage, and suppose in the middle of a trial, there is a significant change in a particular regulation, it might affect your logistic planning in there. With some regulatory authorities, there might not be enough clear guidance documents or clear guidance or regulations around certain specific, so that also may pose as a challenge or as a regulatory challenge. Last but not the least, like for example, for the biological samples like blood or serum samples, not only the regulations, but also sometimes the hospital policies may also impact your logistics of the biological samples. That's a very good question, actually, because the timelines and the budget are quite strongly interlinked. And these challenges may impact a trial at various stages. Suppose if they are hitting at the very early startup stage of the trial, and your site activation or startup of the trial is delayed. So every single day's delay in starting the trial has significant cost implications, because it costs a lot to run the trial and everything, and not only the cost implication, but also there is a loss or potential loss of opportunity, because every company wants their drug to be the first in the market. So if there are any delays in the startup stage, that really kind of hits your timelines. And most importantly, that every single day's delay, I believe that it's a kind of a disservice to thousands of patients who are actually waiting for that new drug to be developed and launched for their unmet medical need. We are operating in a global scenario where there are always events happening. There is a Ukraine war happening. There is some elections happening in some countries. So there may be many, many things. But one of the best examples from the recent past would be maybe the COVID pandemic, because this was an event of a global scale, and team really showed fantastic resilience and a lot of creative thinking to overcome that challenge. We had a pretty solid or pretty robust platform internally, where all the real-time information pertaining to these changes and the impact of the COVID pandemic was first of all collated in one place. It was available readily, and not only that information was available, but it was also made available to all the stakeholders so that they could plan, they could modulate their plans accordingly in light of the latest real-time information available. So we ensure that, as I said, every single patient, he or she received the medication which they were supposed to receive. So there was no interruption in the supply of medication. For that, we had to deploy a lot of innovative strategies, I would say, a lot of flexibility, of course. For example, during the COVID, a lot of patients, they moved from one location to maybe say their native place, their native country, their native province, or their native city. So for us to manage that despite that they still get the drug, how we can transfer that patient from one site to another, one location to another location, how we could move the drugs which are available at a particular site to another site. So all of those kind of multiple of those kind of strategies really help. But the good thing was that at the end of the day, we were able to provide the drug to every single patient who they were supposed to receive. That was also a very nice example of when the team works together, there is solid planning in place, there is solid implementation in place. Personally, have seen a lot of evolution, say in packaging, for example. I've seen a lot of changes and evolution for the better in terms of shipment tracking, live shipment tracking, also in terms of the temperature tracking or real-time temperature tracking of those shipments. So that we have come a long way on those fronts. But where I'm also seeing the newer trends emerging is like maybe, for example, use of the AI, for example, in the supply management. Also, use of say automation in terms of the study supply and the IP management. So these are some of the newer therapies, the newer areas which I think will have a significant impact on the overall scenario. Also, since the type of therapies has also changed over a period of time. So now, for example, a good example is the cell therapies, where the logistics is a very, very important component of the whole picture. And for this therapy to be adopted on a very wider scale, it is important that the costs really come down. And logistics has also some role to play in there to bring down the cost as well. So I think these are some of the trends which I think will over a period of time will really evolve and will also change the market dynamics. So first of all, logistics as a topic, which is usually always in the background and only comes into focus when something goes wrong. So I'm really glad, first of all, that you guys have organized an event which is focused entirely on the logistics piece. So it's a very important component, not only the entire pharma landscape, but more so specifically in the clinical trial landscape also. So definitely, I mean, kudos to you guys for organizing this. Now, I'm expecting, because for this particular my panel discussion, there will be a lot of industry leaders joining. So I think audience can expect to hear some real life examples, learn from the real experience, personal experiences of these or their team's experiences from these industry leaders. And also, I think maybe we get a peek of what is to come in near future in the field of logistics, clinical trial supplies, and in general, the distribution technology. So I'm hoping that we'll also get a kind of a taste of the future in there as well.